So you know what I've been listening to a lot lately?
I don't know.
The World Ends With You soundtrack.
Oh, wow. That actually came out of left field. When
Right?
did you start listening to that?
I don't know. I've been thinking about that game a lot lately, though.
Aw, cute.
I feel like it has such a unique flavor of soundtrack. I don't know, it's hitting the spot at work right now.
Dang. I know how you feel about your video game different soundtracks while you're working.
It needs to hit the mood just right for peak productivity. You know?
Yeah, I mean, you rely on a whole soundtrack, and I just listen to one song on repeat now.
What is that? Just one?
Just one.
Okay.
That's all I need. That's all that lives in my head. There's nothing else. It's just this one song.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the Chocobo theme, you know?
Is there like a little dancing chocobo in your head the whole time?
Can you see it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, you can see it too?
It's a window in through your forehead.
Oh my god. I didn't know you could see it.
Everyone can. We all can.
Oh. Should I go to the doctor?
Yeah. He'll remove it.
I can't get it out of my head.
I love you growing into your Final Fantasy fan stage.
I'm not happy about it.
Because I feel like this is a stage we all go through.
Well,
It's just, there's the denial stage.
Yeah.
The chocobo stage.
Oh no, I'm just getting started.
Just wait till you hit your Moogle stage.
Oh, I don't want to go through the Moogle stage.
Oh, there'll be a Moogle stage.
No.
And then it's just acceptance. It's like the stages of grief.
Oh.
Denial, chocobo, Moogle,
This
acceptance.
This is harder than puberty.
Yeah, there's only 4 for Final Fantasy.
Wow.
Yeah.
When do you suplex a train?
It's kind of like a transitional stage between Chocobo to Moogle.
Oh, God. Well, I have fun things in store, everyone.
It's like the equivalent to anger. Welcome to ThoughtCast, the video game podcast. My name's John.
I'm Allie.
If we didn't scare you away already, we have an absolute treat for you today. We are going to be talking to Jarory de Jesus all about his role as a narrative designer at Housemarque and really his career in general. So,
What a 180 from whatever the heck we were just talking about.
we were talking about music, and you know what? Now it's time to hit it. This week, we're so excited to have Jarory de Jesus, a narrative designer for Housemarque. So, Jarory, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Just for anyone listening, can you tell us a little bit about you and some of the things you've kind of done in the games industry up to this point?
Sure. Yeah, I started as a hobbyist learning Unity when that was the hotness to learn. This is like 2016, and then I got a master's degree from the University of Central Florida in game development, and from there I went to work on Madden. During my degree program, we shipped a title called Scamp, which is a free-to-play platformer on Steam. I highly recommend you check it out. It's got a cute little imp as a main character. And I did most of the narrative for that game, and that was quite fun. That was my foray into narrative what get me started with. Eventually, I moved over to Scopely to work on Marvel Strike Force as a designer. I kept pestering them to let me be in the narrative room, and they eventually let me be in the writers' rooms. And that eventually landed me the job on Star Wars Jedi Survivor as a narrative designer, where I was working on the Coruscant level and a couple of others on Jeddah and Kobo. I did a lot of the VO setup there for voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
And then that got me a chance to leave the country, which has been a dream of mine for a long time. And now I'm in Finland working at Housemarque on things I'm not legally allowed to talk about.
We
Fair
love
enough.
an NDA.
Yeah.
We love an NDA in the games industry.
Yeah. Awesome. So, like, having done so many cool things like Jedi Survivor, working on like Marvel Strike Force, what actually like brought you into the industry? What made you say like games, that's for me, right?
Yeah, so my bachelor's is in anthropology, actually, with a and I was doing a PhD at SUNY Binghamton on like bioanth, basically with a focus on mental health and kind of the evolutionary roots of how depression kind of hijacks the body's internal systems.
Oh, that's
Loved
awesome.
the subject, hated academia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could not be asked. And after I did my internship, I had a summer where a friend of mine was like, "Hey, why don't we just start our own business?" And I was like, "Sure." I don't want to go back to grad school. I'm miserable. Let's do that. And we kind of designed Pokemon Go about a year before Pokemon Go was announced.
Oh.
It was like you would go around the real world and fight monsters and do quests for people. It was kind of a fun little app.
Yeah.
But we didn't realize what we had or how to reach that vision because none of us were game developers, knew anything about games.
Yeah.
Except playing them, but not like proper programming.
Yeah.
So I taught myself how to code, and then I started learning Unity. And when I realized the direction I was going, I was like, yeah, I love doing this. Let's just do this for the rest of my life.
That's amazing. And so what brought you to Housemarque?
Yeah, Housemarque was more of an opportunity than anything special about Housemarque. They have a really good working culture, and I think Finland as a whole cares about their people, and that drew me to wanting to come here. But I'd always wanted to get out of the U.S. and live abroad for a little bit of part of my life. And when I got the opportunity to get a narrative design position at Housemarque and, work on a project that I think is pretty cool and can't wait to talk about, that kind of sealed the deal for me. I was like, yeah, I'm absolutely going to take that.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
We've mentioned that you're a narrative designer already, but for anyone who isn't familiar, what kind of is the role of a narrative designer in the game design process?
Yeah, so a narrative designer is kind of like a hybrid bridge that takes game design and writing and sort of blends those two disciplines together. They don't do as much writing as a games writer may do. They seldom do writing, actually. But what they do is take scripts and written dialogue and get it to feel right and make sure it's paced well within the context of the game. They also design systems to make those written dialogue lines feel good to the player when they're interacting with them. So, they may come like if you look at Mass Effect, for example, they have the dialogue choice wheel, right? That's a narrative system that some narrative designer would have come up with and decided how it looks, how it feels, that kind of stuff. Or, you look at Undertale, for example. Even though Toby Fox is a one-man art machine when it comes to games, if there was a team behind it, the kind of mercy and fight system would be something a narrative designer might have come up with, right? Because it's linking the narrative and the gameplay together.
Definitely. And I feel like with that, kind of your background in anthropology and just like having that kind of psychological basis for your work, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that has to help make those systems feel good to the player as they're kind of going through the games, right?
Having a understanding how people work and how they think is kind of the core of a designer's discipline anyway. Most game designers are secretly psychologists, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah.
So, having that background and also having that cultural awareness helps me understand systems in different ways, I think, than designers who come from a more traditional game design degree program.
No, definitely. Especially because keeping the player engaged, I feel like we've all experienced games where there are games that you can't tear yourself away from.
Oh yeah.
And there are games where it's like, I'm not quite engaged with this for X, Y, Z reason. And I don't know, at least from my experience, it is those kinds of, as you describe it, those narrative tools, like the choice wheel in like Mass Effect, or like in a game like Fire Emblem Three Houses, right? I know that we kind of share an interest in that. But how you would you say a narrative designer's role, just for my understanding, how you engage with all of the characters in a game like Fire Emblem Three Houses, like a narrative designer kind of has a heavy hand in making sure those interactions feel good and
I think so.
Clip.
I think the difference between a writer and a narrative designer, a writer is going to write lines that sound good.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean they feel good to the player once they hear them. The voiceover delivery, the mechanisms by which those lines are delivered, whether it's just text on screen or if it's like, a booming voice and all of that, right? Like all those minor details about how you interact with a specific line of dialogue make a difference in how we experience that dialogue, right? It's
Yeah.
like the difference between sending a text message to someone versus having a conversation with them. And I think a narrative designer's job is to make that experience as authentic as possible. Not necessarily realistic, because, in Fire Emblem Three Houses is a great example. I don't find that the conversations there are very realistic conversations because they have to be flexible enough to handle all the branching narrative. So there's a little like uncanny valley to some of them, but they're
Yeah.
engaging because there's an authenticness to the feeling of those characters that comes across.
Yeah. Are there any constraints within your role that people wouldn't expect? Like, one I just heard recently was that when we're getting people to do voiceover work for games that I work on, we have to make sure that we pay them per word or something like that. And I was like, you have to pay
Wow.
people per word? That's nuts. So I'd never heard that before. Are there any constraints that people just may not know about that are a part of your role?
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of casting, so I'm less familiar with the kind of cost for casting, but I do know the biggest hurdle I tend to run up against as a narrative designer are other game designers, bizarrely enough.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of game designers who aren't focused on narrative have this kind of bias against narrative design that they feel like it should be a side thing or like not take away from the core gameplay experience, as they would say,
Mm-hmm.
which I've always fought against because I think narrative and mechanics and visuals all form the gameplay experience. You
Yeah.
can't have one in isolation and make it okay. There's the what is the game where you play as a cube and the narrative just made me empathize with the cube. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like it was
No.
a really astounding game.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but the game is also escaping me right now.
But yeah, the idea that like the narrative is going to intrude on gameplay seems to be a very pervasive thought, especially among more junior designers. So that's something I've had to contend with that I didn't expect to contend with.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. Is the game Allie just furiously Googled? Is it Edge?
I can't remember.
No.
dang it.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
No.
It'll come back to me before the end of this meeting.
No, definitely. But yeah, I feel like that makes sense because it feels like, and I kind of run up into this. I work in higher education. I feel like in a lot of industries, everyone's the master of their domain, so they kind of like pioneer that or really lift that up. And so I could see how sometimes running up against like those different domains could kind of be the challenge point where it's like you want to herald like the narrative design because it does need to work so well in tandem, because if the narrative design isn't there, then everything else would feel so strange, almost uncanny, especially when kind of
Right.
interacting with the game.
Yeah.
Uncharted is a great example of this, right? Where like
Yeah.
Nathan Drake commits like mass murder on a regular basis, and we kind of are just supposed to hand wave that away
yeah.
as like the adventure of it all.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's fine. You know.
Also, the name of the game finally came to it. It's Thomas Was Alone.
Oh.
Oh, I have
Yeah,
heard
yeah.
of that one.
So, going along with that, you've worked with so many interesting IPs, right? From Marvel to Star Wars to Madden. Are there any challenges in your role that are kind of associated with kind of these very protected, IPs?
Yeah. Madden was probably I wrote some dialogue on Madden. It's the only time I've ever gotten the advice, make it more generic,
Oh.
like less flavor, which was radical to me at the time because they were like, we had a system on Madden where you could get text messages from players depending on who you're up against.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, any player could in theory send that text message. So it has to be generic enough that it's not too flavorful that you couldn't
Oh.
see that player saying that. And then Star Wars is, well, Star Wars. There's
Yeah.
so many things you have to consider, and if you don't, some fanboy somewhere will, and then it'll come up again in the internets. So Lucas is particularly protective of that IP, and or Disney now, right? And so that one was probably the most difficult to work with, if I had to say.
I can only imagine because I have watched kind of separate from game, but like the shows, I've seen interviews with like voice actors and shows, and like hearing them talk about what they can say and what they can't say, and how this ship needs to be absolutely perfect. If there's one motor out of line, then it needs to be like, it needs to be reworked. No, that's so interesting with the Star Wars specifically, because I feel like Star Wars is such a harrowing franchise.
And the weird thing is, Marvel, both owned by Disney, has a totally different approach. We on Marvel Strike Force got to like invent original characters, and also got to like do our own version of existing characters. So there was like I think we shipped Deathpool. I think that was a character that was in production when I left, so I think it shipped eventually. Where we got to come up with the original version of Deadpool, and that was Deadpool's daughter or something like that. I don't remember the exact details. But like with Marvel, it was like, hey, here's what we want to do, and they're like, cool. And that was really the end of the conversation. Sometimes it was like, okay, this is a little untrue to the character. Can you do this instead? Right?
Yeah.
Like we had Moon Knight, and it was like, Moon Knight is brutal but not out of control, and so we wanted to be more in control during his like strikes. And I was like, okay, like it's animation cleanup stuff that they were really concerned about, less so much the narrative. But Marvel was a lot easier to work with than Lucas.
That's cool to have so much freedom with something like Marvel, which is now it's a bigger juggernaut sometimes than even Star Wars is in a lot of occasions.
Right.
So being able to have that freedom to like add characters because it fits with the game that you're trying to make is so like cool and interesting, and I'll be honest, fully unexpected.
Yeah.
It surprised me as well, but I'm totally glad we got the opportunity to design those characters. They were really fun to be part of those conversations and give my input on how I thought they should evolve. That was quite a good time.
Yeah,
definitely.
What's the biggest difference between working on an indie title like Scamp versus a AAA title like Star Wars, for example?
I think on a indie title, you have to do more different things. The more you scale up into like a AAA type studio, the more specialized your role becomes, and the less variety you have in your day-to-day tasks. When I was working on Scamp, I was the producer, the narrative designer, a technical designer, also sometimes a programmer. I was doing everything. I wouldn't dream of doing that at on Star Wars, right? I had a very narrow slice of the game, and everything in that domain I was kind of responsible for. But to this day, I've never played the ending of Star Wars, even Jedi Survivor, even though I've seen it a bunch of times. I've never actually played through it because it was outside of my domain. And I have a copy that I finally got from Respawn, so I'm actually excited to play and experience that like a player would for the first time.
Yeah. What's it like experiencing a game that you worked on, like the finished product, like for the first time? I feel like that has to be a really interesting and almost surreal experience.
I get more out of watching other people experience it than in my own, because for me, I saw it I did the part of the intro sequence on Coruscant for Jedi Survivor.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of the prototyping in that when it was just like not the right characters, and we had to get the walk and talk right and all of that. So I saw that come together over time into what it was when it shipped, and even before it shipped, I saw like when the models were still not quite the right size and clipping through things and all of that, right? So you see all these bugs, you see the final product, but unlike Scamp, where I was involved in pretty much every step of that process because of the nature of how integrated the narrative was to the gameplay, with Star Wars, I hadn't experienced some parts of it. So I don't spoil some of it. When I was playing through the fight with Vader as Seer, I did a bunch of VO for that boss fight that I set up. So I had done that fight a dozen times, but I had never seen the transition sequence out of that fight and the cutscene that plays, and that was really cool to be like, oh, so this is what's supposed to happen afterward.
Yeah. That's so cool. Like the fact that you are so focused on like a particular kind of place, and then when once it kind of exits that, that Coruscant. It's like, all right, passing it off to, passing it off to you, high five out, like tag in, tag
Right,
out.
exactly. Tag out.
Yeah. And I guess it would make sense that kind of being able to see how other people kind of engage with those experiences that you've worked so hard on would be such a cool kind of thing.
When I did so Scamp has speed runs, which blew my mind.
Yeah.
That a game that I made as a student that is free has a speedrun community in it. And the game is supposed to be like an hour to 2 hours long, right?
Mm-hmm.
The speedrunners can beat it in 5 minutes because they found a glitch. And we were like, all of us were watching, like, how did we not notice this ever?
Yeah.
No, that's so funny. I feel like that's always how it happens. Like, someone discovers one glitch, and then, like, at least at my studio, all of QA will just be like, oh, yeah, interesting. Yeah. Do we want to patch that out, or do you like this? Like, how do you feel?
Right, and that is good QA. Like, good QA isn't like, hey, this is a bug. They're like, this could be a bug. If you want to keep it in, it could be a feature, right? Like, their job is to identify problems and then leave it for the design team to decide if that's part of the experience they want to incorporate for like speed runs and things like that. But on Scamp, the bug was something that went under the radar the entire time, and because none of us had tried, you can like on the ground you could drop a clone, right, and then you could teleport to the clone.
Yeah.
None of us had tried immediately dropping a clone in midair and then teleporting to it, so within like the same frame. That just never occurred to us, and it resets your jumps when you do that, so you could get an infinite number of jumps through because it treated the clone as ground.
Wow.
Almost like a Sonic Boom Knuckles situation where you can
kind of
like, which is slightly different, but like in that game you can pause, and then when you leave the pause screen you can jump again, and then pause and then jump again, and you can do that infinitely in that game. So it's like that's so interesting that someone immediately like figured out that if you drop the clone you can just keep jumping and just keep scaling up the game.
Right. And the fascinating part to me is that they then compete. They're like 5 people who competed to see who could do this faster.
Yeah.
And that was such a cool feeling. Like, I built a thing that people are now having fun with.
Yeah. And I think fun is so much like where you find the fun. And if it is something where like it's technically a bug, but like you said, now it's a feature because they have so much fun like doing this. And same thing with, like any percent speedruns of like any game where you just find these cool little exploits that it's like the fun of the discovery that you can play with physics systems or anything like that in a game to speed up the process. I think that's so cool, like when the community like finds those things.
Yeah.
And I love when games acknowledge this. A good example is like Half-Life 2, right? If you pick up the gravity gun and you like immediately grab an object with it while they're monologuing or talking to you and then launch one, I think Alex will be like, oh, you know what you're doing, okay, we can move on. Like,
yeah.
when a game is like aware that you're gonna try to speed run the game.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be nice if Pokemon started doing that.
Oh, it'd be great.
That'd be nice for me in my shiny hunting endeavors.
Yeah. But so shifting gears just a bit, you spoke at the 2023 Game Developers Conference about what narrative designers can learn from hip hop, right? So what kind of went into creating that talk?
So I have been involved in the hip hop community for as long as I can remember, since I was like 12 or something.
Yeah.
I have been making beats and writing rhymes and all of that for a long time. I kind of haven't done that as much lately, but it's a big core to my identity. And when I started writing and doing more writing in games, I was like, someone was like, okay, we got to fit the words in like this space. And I was like, man, this feels like I'm writing like raps again.
Yeah.
Like I got to get it to fit in the line. And that was the kind of impetus for designing this talk, where it was like, wait, these things overlap a lot. Hip hop artists want to be very precise with their words, at least the good ones. And they sort of structure their language in a way that's like privileges types of words over others. So like actions like that characters do is more important to the story of a hip hop track than like the descriptions of what the characters are.
Yeah.
So you might let that fall by the wayside, or you might like privilege ideas about what the character thinks more than what they look like or feel like or sound like, because that's kind of a you can fill in the blanks there. And game writing is very similar. You want to focus on what the player has done, what actions they have chosen, and then I built a bunch of ideas around that entire kind of concept. I did the same talk again at DevCom, but I had expanded on it because at GDC I initially pitched for an hour and they gave me 30 minutes, so I cut like half the content out to make it fit in the 30-minute slot. Which is a shame because a lot of the like direct links to what games followed these ideas were in the cut content. So the DevCom version, which I think will be on YouTube as well, you'll see a lot more. I am ashamed of myself though. I was so nervous on stage doing that. I said I think I called DJ Cool Herc. I was like, these are different people.
No, yeah.
Oh no.
That's one of those things where, especially when you're up on stage, like speaking, I don't know about you, but I get very cold feet in situations like that.
Oh my god, the sweatiest hands, and then oh my gosh, when you do like the questions portion, because you kind of know like what you're going to say, and you have a good run of show for that. But then when it comes to questions, that's where I always freeze up. I'm like, what are you gonna ask me? Will I know the answer? Will I even retain that you're asking me something? I don't know. These lights are very bright. Yeah.
Basically like that.
Yeah. Okay, so you discovered that hip hop ended up having correlations to game design and narrative design. But is there anything else that you've experienced working in the games industry that you never would have expected prior to entering?
I think there are two things that really stand out to me when I think of like the unexpected, right? The first is like the amount of ego in the games industry.
Oh yeah,
is pretty intense. That I did not see coming. Where because I remember in grad school they were always kind of teaching us like you got to work in teams and teams are what matter and teams. So getting into the games industry and being like people always being like I'm hot shit and you're like okay. I guess you have a senior or director title, so I can't argue with you, but like whatever. So that one caught me off guard. On the flip side of that, the number of people who voluntarily crunch, not like
yes.
Oh yeah.
I have a coworker. He's a dear friend, and every day I have to tell him like, go home, take a break, like you need one. And he comes in at the same time as me, but usually stays like 2-3 hours later than me. So I'm usually encouraging him to like, hey man, like it's not that important. You go home to your girlfriend, like priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah, the voluntary crunch always breaks my brain because like we had one team bonding outing that we were supposed to go out on, and we left at like 5 right at when everyone was done working, and then we come back and one of my coworkers decided not to join us, and we get back to the office at 9 p.m. and she was still working. We were like, what are you doing? Like, you need to leave. And so then we had to like rip her away from her desk, take her out for pizza, and we're sitting there and she was still talking about work, and we're like, girl, no, like, how is your life? Are you okay? Like, don't voluntarily crunch.
So many people do it because they feel they have to justify being in the industry. Like, it's so competitive and difficult, and almost every person I know, myself included, suffers from imposter syndrome at some degree. And so it's like, oh, they're gonna find out I'm a fraud, so I gotta work extra hard. And I finally got to a point where it's like, wait, they don't pay me enough to do this.
No, but I can, I'm not specifically in the games industry, but even just like putting things on YouTube, right? Or, even in my work, so often I will stay after or stay late in the work I'm in because I'm not new in my career, but I'm newer than most. And so it's very much I need to justify that I'm an important part of the team, that I am an essential part, not just, easily replaced. So I stay after. Sometimes I've gotten a lot better recently,
Yay.
luckily. But like even with YouTube, it's very much, that imposter syndrome is so, like, it gets in your head so bad because you do feel like you need to justify those things. But 9 times out of 10, you're the only one thinking that of yourself, that you don't belong on the team.
Yeah.
And so it's just like allowing yourself the space, which is so much easier said than done, to be like, I know I'm doing good work, I know I'm doing well, and I know my team trusts the work that I'm doing, is so important. But there's always that little voice in the back of the head that's just like, but
what if?
Yeah.
For me, when I started giving talks, that was actually the turning point in my confidence, and when my imposter syndrome started dialing down, because I would see the reactions and I'd go on stage like, oh my god, that talk went awful, I made all these mistakes. But then people would come up to me afterwards and give me all these compliments, like, I learned so much. And because what was supposed to be happening, but they don't, they just know what they experienced. And that positive feedback kind of helped me break out of the cycle of like, well, it should have been this good and I'm a faker, to like, okay, people are still taking away things from, even when I make mistakes, they still take away something.
Yeah. Because you're the only one who knows that there was a mistake. And so everyone else is like, this was such an awesome talk. It gave me so much insight into, hip hop does clearly have a lot that you can take from it to include in narrative design so that everything can fit well and do all of these things. I'm sure.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Because we did loop back to it, I am curious, is there a game that you've experienced that you feel like does that particularly well? Taking those lessons from hip hop, whether it's consciously or unconsciously?
Yeah, in my talk I actually mentioned Undertale as an example of a game that uses a very similar musical structure to like a verse. Like, if you look at each boss as kind of a chorus, and every segment of town with puzzles is a verse, right? Like, choruses reinforce themes, and every boss in Undertale reinforces its central theme.
Yeah.
Whereas the verses allow you to explore the themes in different ways. And so you have like Core and Snowden Town that have different vibes and different puzzles, but at the same time are playing towards that boss fight at the end that is pulling on those themes. And I don't think Toby Fox time traveled and heard my talk, right? What I think is Toby Fox is a musician first and foremost. And that really influenced the way he understood and structured his design.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's insane. Because, like, I know about design pillars and everything. I'm on the marketing side, so I don't personally touch any of the games except for, like, cool graphic in-game banners sometimes on the rare occasion, to, like, buy our DLC, please.
Yeah.
Marketing efforts. But, yeah, so I knew about design pillars, but the idea of breaking it down to, like, chorus, verse, like, that's... Wow, that just broke my brain. And Undertale is... Yeah. Whoa! Now I want to replay Undertale.
No, yeah. Now is the time.
It's one of my all-time favorites.
So good.
Speaking of your favorites, I think it's safe to say, we mentioned it earlier, but we share a fair amount of games that we enjoy.
A little bit.
Just a smidge. But have games that you enjoy, like Undertale or like Persona 5 Royal or Fire Emblem Three Houses, have these affected how you approach your work as a narrative designer for games like Jedi Survivor, or even like Madden Story Mode or anything like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think on Madden a lot less because I was still early in my career and like more following marching orders, right? Doing what I was told.
Totally.
But like currently at Housemarque, in project I'm not allowed to talk about, I do try to slip in a lot of like, hey, this is like a fun little anime trope. What if we kind of like slip that in there, right?
Yeah.
I am deeply influenced by the games I play, and I think Persona 5 is another great example of where the mechanics and the story really complement each other.
Yeah.
You have the confidant system, so you interact with people, and that gives you a buff, which then you can use to save time later so that you can interact with more people, right? And it's this whole like nice little loop, and I am trying to achieve that level of synchronicity in every project I tackle now after playing that and seeing what that could look like.
Yeah.
I have a lot less influence on things in like the AAA projects like Star Wars and House and what I'm working on Housemarque than I do on my own personal projects. So I do a lot of projects on the side where I get to explore these themes and ideas more. One of them is this hip hop JRPG that I'm developing called Concrete Rose, where I'm taking
Okay.
a lot of these lessons and applying them.
Ooh.
That sounds like a really cool concept for a
Thank you.
JRPG.
Yeah, I have been tinkering with this idea for the past 2 to 3 years,
Yeah.
but really went in this year on like actually developing into like a prototype and actually like bringing that vision to life. I've got the story and all that mapped out, so it's just like fun to see something I've had in the back of my mind actually start coming to fruition now.
Yeah. Are you working on that independently, or do you have some folks that you've met through your time, like in the games industry, that are kind of helping you with that, or?
A little bit of both. I think at first it was just me, and a lot of times I am doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but I can't do art, so I tend to
Yeah.
reach out to like my artist friends and, hey, can you like give me this little character or like do this for me, right? So
Yeah.
that's mostly where I'm getting the help. More recently, I've gotten help from a local friend of mine here, who's a designer, and they are brilliant. They don't feel they are, but like every time they suggest something like that is a genius idea, I wish I
Yeah.
thought of that. Um, so I've been getting help from them and trying to build a team around the project. That's kind of the ultimate end game for me, but we'll see if I get there.
And you'll need to keep us updated on, because that sounds like a game that I would adore
Oh my
playing.
Same.
Oh, absolutely. I
Like,
will absolutely send it to you.
keep us updated, like genuinely.
I'm already like, wait, I
Yeah,
want to play
yeah.
this now. Like, can I put this on my Christmas wish list? Wait, it's not ready
Yeah.
yet. Like, that's so fun. Speaking of fun, so you're making these projects that sound so cool. What is the most fun that you have had while working on a game?
Oh man, this moment lives in my head rent free. I think it's working on Scamp,
Mhm.
and I remember we were debating on what we were gonna work on and like ideating and figuring out what we wanted to build. And
Mhm.
then our artist, she like kicks in the door, does like this like
Yeah.
Oh.
post thing, and it's just like, okay, what if you're like a stupid ugly imp?
Yeah.
And we were all like, what? Like, yeah, you're just like a little troll of an imp. And I was like, actually, that's not a bad idea. That could be fun. And we had every time on that project, someone came up with an idea. Our go-to model was like, I like that. Make it stupider. So
Oh my god, those are the best projects.
it was so much fun to work on Scamp and just be like, for example, we had these ladders because the level designer and the artist decided to put ladders in the game. But then
Yeah.
someone's like, but the players are gonna want to walk on the ladder.
Mhm.
And then the artist Riley, she comes in again and she's just like, okay, what if we just put an out of order sign in front of the ladder? And I think a more serious designer would have been like, but then they're just gonna try to use the ladder anyway. But all of us like, no, it's brilliant.
Perfect.
And so if you play the game, all the ladders have an out of order sign in front of them.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Were they drawn to look like dilapidated in any way, or is it just
No,
like a
they're
perfect ladder?
perfectly functional ladders.
That's so much better. I was really hoping that was the case. Oh my god. I love that energy so much. That's the best.
I'm trying to bring that into all my projects now.
Oh, yeah, I can only imagine the fun of freedom. I can only imagine like just being able to just yes and throughout the whole process.
Absolutely. And that was a skill I had to learn. I think when I first started as a designer, I was more prone to say no than yes.
Mhm.
And now I think over the years I've gotten much better about being like, yeah, let's do that, but let's try it like this, or we can do that and do this, right?
Yeah.
Like try to enhance people's ideas rather than thinking my ideas were the best ones in the room, which they rarely are.
No, yeah. And I feel like everyone has a solid core of an idea, but so often, maybe like if I had an idea on like the YouTube channel, then Allie would be like, that's cool, love it. What if you did this, or what if you approached it in this kind of way? And I'm like, whoa, That's like incredible, and I never would have thought of it. Sometimes there just needs to be that foundation for other people to build
A
off of.
springboard off of. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like improv, where you
Yeah.
just yes and everything. You're not supposed to say no when you're on stage and everyone's watching you do improv.
Yes.
You're just trying to figure it out. Yeah.
When I was doing my master's, we actually had to take a whole semester on improv as
Really?
part of our training, because that was a thing they wanted us to learn and be better about as we were. It came later in the year, so once that kind of sunk in, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense now.
Dang. It all comes together.
That's so interesting, because I'm sure it was so beneficial and it's so important in so many ways. But that's so cool that your program actively had you take an improv class so that it can prepare you best. That's because I never would have thought of that in terms of, when you're learning to be a game designer, outside looking in. It's just like the mechanics of like designing the games, but the improv side of things, that's so interesting.
Yeah, I think game design is more about the people than the mechanics at this point.
Yeah, totally. We've talked a lot about your role as a narrative designer and kind of what you do in the games industry. What do you enjoy doing outside of work to kind of keep yourself sane?
Well, I'm really a bad example because I do spend a lot of time out of work working on my personal projects.
Well, yeah.
Because I find it quite fun just to do the freedom of writing rather than the kind of restricted kind of AAA space stuff. But outside of that, I play music, I write poetry. I've been a slam poet for 20 years, and I've been playing music since I was like 10. So those are like two of my biggest hobbies, and I love cooking. I'm always experimenting with different dishes in the kitchen and trying to figure out like, ooh, what if I make this spice combination? Does that work? And most of the time it doesn't, but when it does, it's like golden.
Yeah. You're like, I'm writing this recipe down. I am making sure that it does not escape me.
That's so cool that you're into slam poetry. I've been a big fan in following Button Poetry and just watching every single video on their YouTube page for years. Like, I loved slam poetry. I thought I was gonna like go into slam. I used to do it for fun when I was in high school, but I kind of fell off. But like, what do you typically write about in your poetry? Is it like the deep cuts on like your personal
mostly
life or
personal stuff?
Yeah.
I think the one poem that most people who have seen me perform associate with me is one I wrote when I was 19, 20. And it's actually on YouTube. It was a poem I wrote for my brother. My brother was in jail at the time. He wrote me this letter kind of being like, yeah, I feel like a failure. And I couldn't bring myself to write back to him. So I wrote this poem instead, kind of exploring my feelings on that. A lot of times my poetry is very much for me and like my feelings. But I find that a lot of people go like no one goes through anything unique, right? Like everyone is going through something similar, and so sharing that I know I can help people kind of cope with the same feelings they might be having.
Yeah, I did a similar poem. It's what started me on Slam. It was about my brother and how he had like added me on Facebook. We weren't really talking to each other very much, and he's like 8 years older than me, and so he had finally added me on Facebook, and I was like, wait, I have all these emotions because I thought that we weren't going to talk ever again, but now you're like putting a hand out and this is weird. And so I took all of those emotions, put it in a slam poem, and then I performed it for I think I was in like 11th grade or something like that. I was like junior in high school. And I performed it for my class, and they were like, these are a lot of emotions I was not anticipating from you. You're like the quiet kid in the class. What's going on?
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's funny because I use the same method kind of that I write with poetry when I write for games. It's a lot of like exploring topics and emotions that I want to explore. So like the hip hop game is a lot of it's about like it borrows from Undertale and it's kind of like radical peace, like this like binary system like mercy fight, but I framed it in more of like a radical peaceful revolutionary approaches. Because for me as a Black and Puerto Rican individual, those are really critical topics that I've had to contend with my entire life, and I want to be better about sharing what I've learned with other people. And so games is a great avenue to do that, to give people the ability to explore someone's psyche in a way that like poems I can deliver a lot, but with games I can put you in my shoes or put you in a person's shoes who I want you to empathize with.
Yeah, it's such a powerful tool, especially because I mean, you do games for your job, and then you also go home and you can have the freedom to explore those topics and those ideas, and you're not under like the AAA constraints and everything. And I always say to John, like, we can't monetize every hobby, or like, if we have a hobby, we have to have a part of it that isn't monetized.
Yeah.
Like, we just want to do it for fun. And yeah, I've noticed that with like graphic design, with making videos, things like that. Just doing something that's purely for fun. And I'm so happy that you can still have fun with game design as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of resonate with what you were saying of the experiential side, illustrating a message through a game, because like on the YouTube channel, that's the thing that resonates with me most, is when I can kind of experience something that, whether it's something I have experienced in the past, or maybe it's something that I've never had the opportunity to go through or understand myself, but now through the game, I can kind of see, oh, this is why this character's perspective is like this. That makes so much sense. And kind of dive deep into those kinds of situations, like as a player, I think is so much fun and so interesting and so valuable, and why I like doing like the psychology ofs, because it's like,
Yeah, those are great, because I think about those things, but when I watched like your video on Survey, it articulated a lot of thoughts I had that I hadn't been able to put into words. And like Three Houses has given me my all-time favorite character from any medium ever, which is Claude.
Yes.
Because I have not seen a character who's both intelligent and charismatic and not a villain.
Yes. Yes.
Like, that's so rare. Because usually those two things are like, obviously they must be up to something, right? But like someone who's actually just nice but troubled because of like this dual identity that they're wrestling with. I saw myself in a character and was able to like process some of my own issues through that character, and that's something I think games are uniquely situated to do, by having you play through that experience.
Yeah. And whereas with a movie or something, you're only with those characters in that movie for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. With a game like Three Houses, you're existing with Claude or Sylvain or for so long. And I think that game in particular situates itself well, because Claude is, in his route specifically, like Sylvain, seeing how like he changes from like route to route.
Yeah.
And I think that's so cool how you can kind of explore those characters and find characters that you identify with, or find characters that you love that you never would have expected to love. Like going in, I'll stick with Fire Emblem Three Houses. A character I never thought would become my favorite was Felix, right?
Oh, same.
Yep.
Like
Same.
I cannot stand this guy at the beginning.
The worst, but then everything makes so much sense as the game goes on. It's like, oh, he's like low-key great. He's just got like a rough exterior, and it makes sense.
Like, yeah, and especially when you explore his relationship with, through like Dimitri and Sylvain, and you're like, now I understand that this person genuinely, and like, what I love about games like that, or even Persona, or like the new Spider-Man, for example, you get to really explore how people interact. Like, I think for people who may be awkward or not understand necessarily social situations all the time, seeing how characters that you identify with navigate these different situations can give you a base point for how to understand people like that in the future.
Yeah. But a game that I think does that really interestingly is The World Ends With You. If you've ever played that.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one.
Like, seeing like how Neku kind of interacts with the world and grows over time is one of my favorite characterizations, because I didn't necessarily relate to him in the beginning of the game, and I was like, what's his problem?
Right.
But as it all kind of make sense. And now I saw at the time, because I played it when I was in high school, I think, or high school or college. I was like, this gives me so much more perspective on some people that I've kind of encountered in my own life, and kind of taking more of, this was before I had like in earnest got into psychology, like kind of taking more of those empathetic approaches to kind of different kinds of people that I never would have had I not, experienced that game in that situation. But something that we always like to ask at the very end, are you playing anything cool? Are you watching anything cool?
Oh yeah. Well, I just got the new Spider-Man.
Okay. Yeah.
I think I tweeted about this not too long ago, where I got the suit for Miles with the Puerto Rican flag, and I was like, this is the coolest moment of representation I've ever had in a game. Where I have never. It's very rare to get like a biracial lead character, let alone one who's like mapped to my same identity. Like, that was insane of a moment to play in the original Miles Morales. But getting that like suit with the Puerto Rican flag on it, and I was like, they understand the culture so well.
Yes.
Because every Puerto Rican has a flag. Every one of us. I think they give it to us when we're born. It's one of those laws of the universe.
No, the new Spider-Man, I haven't played either of the Spider-Man well, I guess any of the Spider-Man games at this point yet, but seeing everything around Spider-Man 2 has made me be like, because I saw your tweet about that, I was like, this looks like a really good game. Like, I'm so close to pulling the trigger on it.
I would recommend playing the first one. The first one's good. Miles Morales is, I think, a masterclass on inclusivity. One of the characters, I think Miles' romantic interest is deaf and uses sign language, and they'll subtitle the sign language, but like they don't put any audio in the sign language. But like as an accessibility feature in this game, you could have an auto narrator for the sign language in case you needed the accessibility. So they like understood all the avenues through which a player might want to engage with this. One of the side quests I did involved like helping this guy like ask his boyfriend out to homecoming, and it was like really adorable. They're just so good about like grasping all of humanity in a like nice way.
So accessibility features like that are, I think, when I think about games, and I know we've had discussions about this.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that is the hallmark of a really good game, in a lot of instances, is how inclusive and what those accessibility features kind of look like. A game that I, and listeners probably get sick of me talking about it, that I love, that has a lot of really good accessibility features and is just very inclusive, like that is Psychonauts 2. Like,
I still haven't played it. It's on my list.
It's so good.
It's such an incredible game, and they do add like not to that same degree, but a lot of accessibility features so that so many different kinds of people can kind of play through the game. And I think they do really well with representation in a lot of ways, which is why I think it's such a, I don't know, it resonates so well with me, and they're so empathetic about, a lot of times it deals with mental health in the game. Like, that's a big piece of it. Games like that take all of those things into consideration just bring me so much joy, because it's like, wow, everyone should be able to see themselves in games and feel good about being able to play a game.
Yeah.
So I totally get that. I kind of, as much as I enjoyed Baldur's Gate 3, I do think it lacks a lot of the like, it doesn't really, it expects you to know what you're doing already, because like it's like, you've played D&D, nerd, come on, hang out with us.
Yeah.
I like accessibility features, especially because it shows that the company that is developing the game is focused on investing into that, because there is an investment into it. You're taking time away from designers and programmers to keep making the game to do accessibility features, which they're like, yeah, but like, how many people who are gonna play this are actually gonna be deaf? Like, do we really need subtitles? And it's like, come on, like, no, stop making this an investment conversation and focus more on like
the player,
creating an accessible experience for everyone. And like, even if you aren't deaf, there are some people who just really like subtitles. Like, through my market research, Gen Z loves subtitles. So like, it's just a thing that
I'm
you should
ADHD. I
include.
need the subtitles.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So yeah, I really appreciate when they actually put in the features, because you know that they were probably talked about at some point, and they just went, we did a cost analysis and it doesn't fit our investment. It's like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
just put them in.
You said playing Spider-Man 2. Right now, we are knee-deep in Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Yeah, okay.
It's my first time ever Final Fantasy 7 anything. Like, I haven't seen the original game. I haven't really been spoiled on very much. I've been spoiled on, like, the
I mean,
things.
yeah, like the one moment
Yeah.
that everyone's been spoiled on
I mean-
mid game with Sephiroth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'm going in blind, and I'm, like, really excited about it.
But yeah, and then we're playing Cult of the Lamb.
Yeah.
Oh, that game is phenomenal. I actually it's an influence on my second side project,
Yeah.
which is like, so I took the idea of like JRPGs where you like end with like always killing God,
Yeah.
and I was like, what if you start there? What happens after that? And so the idea is that you kill God, and then you're like, okay, well, God's dead, and now the world is gonna end unless someone else becomes God. So I guess I have to become God now. And the idea is that it's like you're actually managing the world, and because you're God, other people are going to be disgruntled with you and now try to kill you. So you have to make like kind of tough choices of like, oh, maybe I do need monsters in this part of the world to keep heroes from coming to kill me so I can actually save the rest of the world, right? And that's like the idea behind the loop of the game.
That is fascinating, because there is a void that, when you kill God, it's like, hey, we killed God, we achieved this feat. What now? Like,
Exactly.
Yeah. That's so funny. I played a town builder that's like not at all similar to that, in that you don't like place monsters and like heroes don't come attack you, but it's like a town builder. It's called Littlewood, and it's like town builder and also like romance life sim. And you kill God, and then you have amnesia. You forget everything that just happened. But everyone's like, "You're this hero. I've been looking everywhere for you. Please let me live in your village." And and as I was playing it, all I could think was, "Wow, I really don't like combat, but I wish I could fight something, or I wish I could like do. I'm a hero. Like I want to be a hero right now. Why am I just settling down? I wanna explore more." And so, yeah, you immediately sold me. I am so excited for this. It's like everything I was missing in Littlewood.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Awesome. It'll be a fun project to get out.
awesome.
That's so cool.
Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. Allie, is there anything else you wanted to ask, or Jarory, is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, this was a wonderful conversation. I think if I've piqued interest in any of your listeners for some reason, they're welcome to follow me on Twitter. My handle is Jarory, like as if it was a high school emo moment. So JRAWRY.
Yeah.
No, definitely. And like if you are listening, definitely go follow him on Twitter, because grade A tweets all the time. I lurk on Twitter, so I'm terrible at interacting with literally anyone, but I enjoy your tweets so much.
Oh my god, thank you.
But no, yeah, so thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Looking forward to having future conversations.
Oh, definitely. But that'll do it for this week's episode of ThoughtCast, a video game podcast. So if you enjoyed this episode, you want to hear more content just like this, make sure to A, check out our Patreon, where you can get episodes just like these a little bit early. And you can also see videos early and get some exclusive content there, which we are very excited to deliver to you. And if you want to continue the conversation, make sure to check us out on Discord. But as always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, a fantastic rest of your week, and why not even a fantastic rest of your month. And we will see you next week. Later.
See ya.